All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks to everyone who is able to join us tonight. I'm Jennifer Oliver. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Dearborn Heights. And tonight, our voter service director, Betsy Cushman, is going to present a webinar as part of the League of Women Voters Making Democracy Work program. Tonight, Betsy will cover information about voting here in Michigan, current legislation and petitions related to voting rights and elections, and ways to combat misinformation. We will have some time for questions during and after the slideshow, so we ask that you write your questions in the chat box as you think of them, and we'll come back to them as we can. And now I'm going to turn things over to Betsy.
Hi, I am delighted to see so many people, and welcome. I know that if you're a member of the League, you know there's two arms to the League, the voter service arm and the advocacy arm. And I am the voter service director for the Dearborn Heights League. So I am doing purely voter education, voter service tonight, but I am also on the state advocacy committee, helping to follow voting rights. So I think that means I'm dual purposed. So we are really pleased, the Dearborn Heights League, to present this update on the changing status of voting rights initiatives and legislation. And it's part of an educational program with funds provided by the state League of Women Voters of Michigan Education Fund. It's not advocacy. And if you want to know where we stand, the State League on advocacy, and on any of the issues we're discussing, please go to our state website, LWVMI.org. And as probably all of you know, voting rights in Michigan are in a state of flux. We really encourage people, and this is maybe the main thing we want you to get from this, is keep checking your trusted sources of information, especially that state website, which keeps being updated. For other sources of information, and we'll mention as time goes by. The purpose of the Education Fund is purely voter service and education. In 2018, many of you knew, I know that we have a lot of new members too. In 2018, the League of Women Voters, the ACLU, the NAACP, and others supported the Promote the Vote ballot proposal that amended the Michigan Constitution. And we learned that voting rights are very popular in Michigan. That Proposal 3, or Prop 3 as we called it, passed overwhelmingly, 67% to 33% of the voters, and it passed in 80 of Michigan's 83 counties. And then in addition to that, the legislature passed and the governor signed to provide for legislation to provide for online voter registration. So we have a lot of new rights that we put into effect or are doing so. And we want to highlight, we'll go to the next slide. And I forgot to say that's the education. So let's do the next slide. And so basically, I'm not going to review all these. The eligibility to vote hasn't changed. One of the things that is important, I think, to mention, though, because a lot of people in Michigan don't know that people who have been in prison are allowed to vote once they have served their time, or if they're waiting for a sentence, not yet sentenced, they are allowed to vote. A lot of us hear our information on a national scale, and a lot of states do not have that, but Michigan has had it for many, many years. Also new has been the same day voter registration. And in fact, you can register anytime up until 8 o'clock on election day. And all those things, many of us have been educating others about. If you want a copy of the presentation, maybe Jen can put my email address and you can contact me for getting a copy of the the PowerPoint if you want the details. Then let's go to the next slide. All registered voters have a right to vote before Election Day by absentee ballot for 40 days. So in fact, we in Dearborn have an election coming up, and I think that starts tomorrow. It starts very, very soon. I think it's tomorrow, 40 days prior to our special election. And of course, ballots have to be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day. And for voting in person, you can go to your clerk's office. If you're lucky enough to have a satellite office, you can do that. But I think that the most important thing that we often share with others is that if you're not sure if you're registered, and tell your people that, go to www.mi.gov/vote and check and see if you are registered to vote, or if you're moved, your address has changed. Don't forget to change that, or tell your friends and family to change. It's an easy thing sometimes to forget. Next slide. And that's voting on Election Day. I covered that. So let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about voter turnout, because we, in November 2020 in Michigan, the difference in the two presidential elections in 2020, 652,000 more people voted than in 2016. So you can see we went from, and whoever's coughing, can you put yourself on mute? Go from 20.
I got it. Thank you.
2016 to 2020. You can see the marvelous difference in voting. So let's go on to the next slide. So Michigan supported 2018 voter rights to expand, and we think it's very possible that as a result of that, that's why so many people voted despite the COVID, they did. So, and of those who voted, 2/3 of them, 3.3 million, voted absentee. And you can see which cities had the top 10 cities for people that voted 2/3 cast absentee ballots. So let's go to the next slide. So basically, in 2020, you can see, we know we had a close election for president in Michigan, and there's been a lot of controversy. But as you can see, we had a much closer election in 2016 in Michigan, but we had no long drawn out campaign saying there was voter fraud. And I want to tell you a little bit about audits. The post-election audits in 2020 general election were the most extensive in Michigan's history. And there were 3 types of audits that were conducted. The first is the precincts on the procedures to make sure that, and this was done by county clerks and some state officials, reviewing more than 200 in-person voting precincts across the state. They are designed to ensure that election officials and poll workers followed the correct procedures, both in conducting the elections and the pre-election process. They included, by the way, a full hand count of paper ballots cast in the US Senate race in each of these precincts that were covered, the 200, all over the state of Michigan. That's the first kind of audit. The second kind of audit is the absent voter counting board audits. And that was new in 2020. The Bureau of Elections worked with the city and county election officials to review all the records and the procedures in the absent voting counting boards in 4 large jurisdictions, and I don't know which 4 those were. They focused on determining how many absent voter counting boards were out of balance and could have been reconciled. And they reviewed the reasons why. And then the third kind of audit was the risk limiting audit that I'm hearing more about. The state conducted a risk limiting audit exercise of the presidential election statewide. Approximately 18,000 ballots were randomly selected from more than 1,300 local jurisdictions statewide. And the results of those randomly selected ballots were compared with the statewide tabulation. And then they also conducted a full hand count audit of all the presidential election ballots in Antrim County, which was the one that has been talked about a lot. Running of elections, as probably most of you know, is a local responsibility in Michigan, and it's held by 1,520 city and township clerks, along with their staff, the volunteers, poll workers, known as election inspectors. They have hired to work in polling places and perform other functions. Auditing of elections, which includes the review of the city and township clerks who ran the elections, is performed by county and state officials. I mentioned that earlier, but I think it's really important that the people who run the elections are not people that do the auditing. There were numerous cases found, there were court cases found, which many of you may have found, that found no evidence of voter fraud. In the Senate Oversight Committee, chaired by Senator Ed McBroom, a Republican, released a report that said the election was safe and secure. And you might have seen that, I think it was yesterday, announced that the Michigan Auditor General's office latest report concluded that 99.9% of all ballots appear to have been legally cast and properly counted, according to this new review. Out of 5.5 million Michigan ballots cast in the presidential election, auditors identified 41, that's 41 out of 5.5 million, that were potentially duplicate votes. And another 1,616 ballots that were counted appear to have been legally cast, but the people died before Election Day and were not removed by Election Day. So let's go to the next, all these multiple court cases and all that. So what's the reaction of the Michigan Legislature? There's been over 100 bills to change the election system introduced in both the Senate and the House. So, and I think a lot of attention was obtained for the 39 bill package that was introduced like almost a year ago to change election law. But these have not become law yet. So let's go to next. So there's a quick presentation here on how a bill becomes a law. And if I could sing, I would sing How a Bill Becomes a Law. Because many of us might remember that jingle. But basically, a bill is either starts in the House or the Senate. You hear testimony. I've been following these now, so it's the legislative process. Listening to the committee's function is very interesting. But the bill is sent then, once it passes, if it does pass through the election committee, then it goes to the full Senate for a vote. Then it goes to the other, the House, or if it started in the House, it goes to the to the committee of the other house. And then it goes back. Eventually, if it gets passed by both the House and the Senate, same bill, it goes to the governor, and the governor can either sign the bill or veto the bill. And it can be overridden with a 2/3 majority vote. Doesn't happen very often. But if signed by the governor, a new law is adopted. So next. So the 39 bill, the current status, well, one thing that I'll mention, there are only 4 members of the Senate Elections Committee and 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat. And the hearing started on these 39 bill package. They started last April and they have been continuing. There has been testimony on all 39 bills, but most of them are still in committee. 12 bills of the 39 have moved, but 4 of them then have been vetoed by the governor. And she said, well, that's, let's go on to the next slide. Yeah, and so she has vetoed, saying that most of them were bills that she said perpetuated the big lie, and that every citizen, she wants to make sure that every citizen has a right to vote. And the bills are listed here. I'm not going to review all of them. So let's go on to, oh, you did, to the resources. You can get a complete copy of the bills and the current status at the State League website, but you can also look up the minutes and the testimony by going to either the senate.michigan.gov or the House and look at what goes on in those committee meetings. And then you can look up a bill. It's wonderful if you haven't done that. Go to the www.michigan.legislature.gov and you can see an analysis of what the cost impacts and what other impacts might be of the bills. It's nonpartisan, does that. So it's very interesting. So next slide. So what can you do? Right now it's saying stay informed. Information is, that means go to the state website. The Secretary of State, if you haven't seen their fact checks at michigan.gov, if you haven't seen that, they go over in detail because reassuring people that the elections truly were safe and secure is truly helpful. Now, are there questions that have been coming up?
I don't have anything in the chat right now, Betsy.
Okay, I see 2 people are in the waiting room.
Yep, hang on, I'm checking that out.
Okay, let's go to, oh, Tricia raised a hand.
Yeah, I don't know, this might be a good time to point out, along with a lot of times people don't trust the system, and sometimes they're not sure if they vote absentee that their vote will be counted, and that's the reason why they may not vote. And I just think it's important to say that you can go to the Secretary of State to make sure that your vote has been received. You know, once you vote absentee.
You can track your ballot, yes. Good point. So we're on now the next slide, which is Secretary of State's legislative agenda. I didn't know until a few years ago that the Secretary of State has a legislative agenda. And this is legislation that she would like to see legislation introduced and passed. It's not been taken up currently, but it deals with equitable access, strong infrastructure, and secure elections. recently some House bills have been introduced that make some of these changes, so maybe we'll see some of that soon. So let's go to the next slide. Petitions. We're going to just cover 3 petitions tonight that we'll be discussing. 2 of them propose to change the laws, and 1 of them is a constitutional amendment, constitutional amendments. And there are 16 or 17 so we're only going to talk about 3. And we're going to review, oh dear, it says my internet connection is unstable, so I hope you can hear me. The citizen-initiated law allows citizens to pass a law that can circumvent the governor and avoid a vote of the people, but they can be changed.
Betsy, we just lost your voice. Oh, there we go.
Oh, is it back?
Yes.
Okay. So a citizen-initiated law allows citizens to pass a law which can circumvent the governor and avoid a vote of the people, but they can be changed again by the legislature. It requires 340,000 ballot signatures on petitions, and that this year they must be submitted by June 1st and verified by the Michigan Board of Canvassers. Then the legislature can enact or place it on the next general election ballot. So that would be for November. A citizen-initiated constitutional amendment allows citizens to amend the Michigan Constitution. And it can be amended only by a vote of the people. And that requires 425,000 ballot signatures. And they have until July 11th to submit. The next slide. So there's an initiative petition that some of you may have already, I know it's in Dearborn, of Secure My Vote. They're being circulated. Seems to be a response to the 2020 election and the belief that there was some voter fraud. Last year on September 8th, a group called Secure My Vote submitted an initiative petition, and it approved the state board to the State Board of Canvassers. And the board approved the form, and they are the ones that need to gather 340,000 ballot signatures. When it filed its report on November 2nd, the committee had about $85,000 to do its work, and $80,000 came from just one donor, Ron Weiser, the chair of the Michigan Republican Party. And to see more details, go to the Michigan Campaign Finance Statement detail. So the next slide, yes. Plan.
And Betsy, I think we have a question from Roberta.
Yes.
Or her hand's up, I should say.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. I'll ask it later because we got off onto different things. I'll ask it later.
Okay, thank you. So this slide is the timeline about how initiative legislation process works. And you really just read the boxes going across. So the proposed law has 40 days to adopt. Well, I got that if the Board of Canvassers validates the signatures, then the state legislature has 40 days to either adopt or reject the proposal. If they reject it, then it goes on the next general election ballot. But if it has an appropriation, which Secure My Vote does, then there can be no referendum on the law. So if the legislature approves it, it becomes law 90 days later. The initiated law can be amended by the legislature after adopted through the regular legislative process. It must be signed by the governor. As I said, Secure My Vote has an appropriation, so there can be no referendum. We don't know when it would go into effect. It's because it takes 90 days to go, if the legislature approves the law, you know, if it gets the signatures, goes through the board of canvassers, and the legislature, if they pass the law, it would still take 90 days after that before it could go into effect. So that means it would have to happen by September 1st, probably around then. So thinking that all the Secure My Vote legislation can't go into effect until 2023, most likely. The next,
Can I make another comment?
yes? Tricia?
Yeah, okay, the reason that we have these numbers, I think is kind of, is because it's a percentage of the people who voted in the previous election. And so we now have to have very high numbers because we have been so fortunate in having a larger voter turnout. And it takes a higher number to change the Constitution, and that's why there's the 425,000. Whereas if you're not actually making a constitutional change, it's not, you have a lower number, but it's all based upon a previous election, how many people voted.
Thank you. So let's go to, we're on 19. These are just some of the things that are required that would be required if Secure My Vote was enacted. Mandates that people disclose their partial social security numbers when registering to vote. Not required now. Those of you who register voters know that you could use your last 4 digits of your social security number, or you can use your state issued ID like a driver's license or some other. You don't have to do your social security number partially. And it would restrict options for registered voters for, you know, it eliminates basically the use of the affidavit that for voter ID that you can sign. An affidavit, and which is not heavily used. I've got the numbers here, so I'm aware of how many people use that. It requires voters to apply for an absentee ballot to include, well, I've mentioned that, not required now, and prohibits election officials from sending or providing absentee ballots unless asked, which is the way it used to be. For those of us old enough to remember that you had to. Now you can sign up for an absentee ballot or ask for one on your website, on the clerk's website. Let's go on to the next one, continued. It bans charitable donations, and it states that drop boxes close at 8 p.m. on election day, which is current law. It mandates new requirement for clerk offices to be open from 9 to 5 for 5 days leading up, or the drop boxes need be made available for return ballots. New appropriation of $3 million to provide for free photo ID, but I understand, I guess I have that in here later, that it currently costs $10 to get your photo ID, and there's provisions for hardships now. So I mean, it's more for some other forms of ID, but you can get a basic one for $10. So let's go on to to the next. Another initiative petition that is for legislation, not for the constitutional amendment, is Audit MI. And it would force a third-party forensic audit of the 2020 election. It had over 200, and we've had, as in red, it says, we've had over 250 audits already of the 2020 election. It would prohibit and prevent state and local election officials who currently perform audits from doing so in the future. So it would create a 20-member audit board. Currently it's determined by the Secretary of State and election officials. And it would raise money to hire private contractors to conduct another review of Michigan's 2020 election. The funding has been kept secret, but currently audits are performed by the Secretary of State with public funds. So the next. So on January 31st, Promote the Vote submitted a constitutional amendment for approval prior to beginning to collect signatures. The Board of Canvassers approved it, the summary, on February 11th this year. And petitions, I think 50,000 have already been printed. They're continue to print them. And training will begin, I understand, later this month. And so you will all probably be contacted for that. And we have until July 11th, but of course we need to do it all before then, but that's the deadline for submitting all of our signatures before then. This I have the 100 words summary of it, but you will all be learning that if you sign up for the training April 30th, I think. There's going to be like workshops that will cover that. As well as, of course, there'll be training starting in a few weeks, a couple of weeks. So, and then this is just the process for the constitutional amendment. But basically, it obviously, if it passes, it amends the Constitution, which makes it much harder to change. So let's go to the next. So basically, it ensures that voters can vote free from harassment, intimidation, and interference, which is not in the Constitution or in the law now. It allows the ballots of military and overseas voters to be counted if they're postmarked by election day and received within 6 days of the election. Again, that's not now law. It provides access to state funding for postage for absentee ballots and security for drop boxes, and access to state funding for absentee ballot tracking that alerts voters if there's an issue and how to fix it. Again, that's not in the Constitution or in the law now. And it allows voters to request an absentee ballot be mailed to them for all future, like the permanent absentee ballot list, without having to apply each time, which is not in the Constitution or law now. Let's go to the next slide. It allows voters to prove their identity when voting in person by showing their ID or signing a legal document. It's not, again, not currently in the Constitution. When voting by mail, voters must provide their signature, which is then verified by election officials. And then it requires election audits to be conducted in public. And it clarifies some other issues. Some parts of that is in current law, but none of it is in the Constitution. And it provides a minimum of 9 days of early voting for 8 hours a day before statewide elections, and preserves the authority of local government to accept publicly disclosed charitable donations and in-kind donations to assure that elections are secure and accessible. So these are things that are not currently in the next. Did somebody have a raised hand before I go on?
Looks like Trisha
Do-
has one.
I do again, once more. Something that I think a lot of people don't know, and that is when they have to, like, when you send in an absentee ballot, you have to have your signature, and then they compare your signature with the Secretary of State's record to make sure that they match. So if you change your signature, maybe you've become debilitated in some way and your signature is now very shaky, or maybe you've just decided to take on a new plot, you need to let the Secretary of State know so that they have it correct in their record and your ballot will not be invalidated.
Thank you. It's a good point. And I'm one of those that I went down to say, you want to make sure my signature is still good, because I think it's changed quite a bit. Okay.
Betsy, we've got something from Carolyn in the chat. Let's see. Just saw if secure my vote is enacted, then the promote the vote becomes nil.
No,
It looks like the original part, the first part of the question was if secure my vote becomes law and then promote the vote passes in November, what happens to secure my vote? So I think there might be.
my understanding is that the constitutional amendment, because those are not constitutional amendments, and constitutional amendments take precedence. So promote the vote is a constitutional amendment. So, provides for amending the Constitution, and that takes precedence over law.
Okay, and there's a comment from Tammy that signature correction is most easily accomplished at the clerk's office. Yes.
Well, at least I had that experience. Okay, so the Brennan Center, and if you don't know, the Brennan Center in part of New York University, somewhere in New York, is a source of excellent information. So when we talk about trusted sources, Brennan Center is one of those trusted sources. And it says that last year, 19 states passed 34 bills that changed voting. And the next slide. And at the federal level, there are bills that perhaps will be moving that may impact those laws in those 19 states that have passed them. And that's the House passed HR 1, the For the People Act, and HR 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And then this year in January, the US Senate did not pass John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. So this is where this legislation currently stands. Next slide. So this, what you can do is to be informed about the legislation and see the action alerts at our national website, LWV.org, and educate people that the 2020 election was safe, secure, and fair. We know that in Michigan. And again, referring you to the Secretary of State SOS fact checks online. Next slide. So what is misinformation and disinformation? Misinformation was unintentional. That's when somebody misinterprets something that happens, or they didn't do their sourcing. Well-intentioned people can easily share content that's outdated or misleading and do it as a mistake. Disinformation, I think we're all learning more about it, is creating or sharing false information with the intent to harm. People, there can be bad actors who spread disinformation online, and they have different motivations. It could be voter suppression in communities of color, it could be spreading just mistrust in a democracy. But the common goal is to have their bad information reach mainstream media. So the next slide. So some of those things, I think most of us have been learning to distrust. Does the URL look strange? You know, I go to the About page and it recommends that you do that and check who is this group if I don't know it. Cross-check the information. If I find a story that I'm wondering about, I look at sources that I really know and to see if they're reporting the same story. Sometimes it's a part, you know, read past the headline. Sometimes the headline just doesn't match the story. And the other thing that I really learned a few years ago was that emotionally charged, if it makes you angry or makes you really like, oh, that's wonderful, any of those strong emotions, it's really good to check them through because it's like, oh, it didn't happen or whatever. So check, you know, that's the intent. Next slide. So how do we combat it? I've seen many things, but mostly, strongly, it's like, don't quote the bad information. Don't say what it is. It only helps spread the lie. And studies seem to show that repeating bad information, even so that you can debunk it, makes people more likely to remember the bad information and not your good information. And then, so you can refer to the bad information without repeating it, sort of saying like some bad actors are making false claims about the legitimacy of the 2020 election, rather than this particular person says that thousands of ballots were stuffed at the election office. You know, this isn't true. That's repeating the information. Then focusing on providing the correct information and if possible, trustworthy sources, where to find the good information. And what they say is inoculation messaging. Think of good information like a vaccine. You want to proactively inoculate against anticipated problem content before it spreads. It cannot be said enough. Do not repeat or quote bad information. The method of showing myth versus fact actually only spreads the myth. So find ways to call out bad information without. So I like to quote that it doesn't take a whole mountain to make change. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever had. So that was a lot of information. Are there any questions?
There's nothing in the chat, so I invite everybody to just pipe up if you have questions.
Roberta.
Hello, I am very curious to see if there's any of these petitions or initiatives that would eliminate this ability for a petition drive to go to the legislature and then just, if the legislature passes it, just be approved and the governor doesn't have a chance to veto it and the citizens don't have a chance to vote on it. Is there any, are there any petitions that work on this?
Roberta, one of these 16 or 17 petitions does have that, but my brain is so crazy. I can't remember which one does. Maybe somebody else here.
Okay, we can.
One of them, because one of them does.
Oh, good, good. I think that's just awful that, that it doesn't go to the voters or the governor.
No, it would go to the voters, but they wouldn't be able, it's a small minority that.
Well, through the petition.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. That's, I'll look for it. Thank you. And then which one is the League of Women Voters Michigan supporting?
I think I'm not supposed to say.
You're not supposed to say that.
So go to the,
I'll go to the website, yeah.
Yeah, advocacy.
because this is purely education, although that's educational. And 9 days for early voting are these business days. It's not, I think it's not all business days. I think it's this direct 9 days before.
That was my understanding when I read the petition language. Yeah. All right, Carolyn, I think you have your hand up. You're muted right now.
Oh, let's try that. Okay now?
Yep.
Oh, all right. I just learned something every day. You need to tell us who, well, can you, who all is supporting the Promote the Vote in terms of organizations?
It's on their website, and it's on
Okay.
our website as well, who the partners are.
Okay. And that question that I asked, I thought I read one of your slides said if this Secure My Vote goes into law, then you couldn't continue with the Promote the Vote. I thought I saw that someplace,
No, I don't think so.
but it's still okay to go ahead with that then. All right. So then my question is, oh, you said the constitutional amendment would override the law then.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
So if that is that, and we are less than an hour. That's
I have a question.
okay, Tricia.
What happens, this is a hypothetical question because it isn't existing now, but what happens if, say, both of those votes were to change the Constitution and they both won? How do they settle differences then? Like if Secure My Vote and Promote the Vote were both constitutional amendments and they both passed, then what happens? Do you know?
What do politicians say? I don't deal with hypotheticals.
Okay, good enough.
That's because I don't know the answer.
Fair enough.
I want to talk about what that one bill or that one petition that that you said that the governor couldn't veto it. How did that get through?
That is, I think it must have been in the Constitution that there was a way around, but it can be amended by the legislature, but you can't. I never knew until this that was a possible way of avoiding it going to the people. I always thought all petitions, once they are approved, they would be put on the ballot, but that can be avoided. You know, it's happened before in Michigan, but I wasn't involved in state legislation then.
Well, it doesn't seem fair.
Well, people can vote, and they can vote for who makes the laws too. What about the Michigan right to vote? my right to vote. I only dealt with these 3 petitions. And I know that there are these other petitions, and if you want to know how the league stance is on them, maybe a little more information, go on the state league website under advocacy, and there's a nice listing of laws and of the ballot proposed, the petitions. That's where I saw there are 17, but I think one of them I heard is might be dropping out of, might not be, hasn't been active. And Pat Kelly is asking if the league is a partner and promote the vote. Maybe I'm allowed to say yes, we are. I'm trying not to show my advocacy. Okay, and Kathy Rosebud, Kosabud said that right now the league has not taken a position.
And I'd just like to highlight that Carol Murphy left a link in the chat box from Bridge, Michigan, which is a good nonpartisan source of information. And it looks like it's an article about what the current initiatives, ballot proposal initiatives are. So
they have some good sources.
Yeah, they do. Definitely check that out. Thanks, Carol.
Hello. Did you answer the question, like the 9 days for early voting, are these business days?
No, these are direct leading up to the 9 days prior to the election.
Actual days, okay, thank you.
And someone asked about, well, I don't know how much I can say in this format. I think the next things that you'll be seeing from the league will be advocacy.
Yeah, I think we'll be getting a lot more information very soon.
Yes. So this is our Making Democracy Work, purely educational. So if that's it, and we are almost at 8 o'clock. But
I'd like to comment, there's a whole bunch of names on here, and I'm not sure where they're all from. Are they from Detroit or other leagues? I
there's some
presume.
other leagues.
Oh, okay.
I recognize several from the Washtenaw County
Okay.
area and some from Oakland area, Maria Wilson.
And Detroit, I saw that one gal from Detroit. Okay, that was
And I-
nice.
I'm actually from down in Lenawee County.
Oh, okay. Well, wonderful, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, this is Sandra Watley. And I am a council person in the city of Inkster, and this has been really great information. And I will be emailing for the PowerPoint presentation. But there's been a lot of information that's been put in chat boxes down here, other places to contact. Would that information also be available with the PowerPoint? Because I've seen, and I wasn't quick enough to write everything down.
Can we do that?
There
You
was
mean-
some email addresses and some, I know I have Betsy's, but there were some other things that were put in the chat box as far as places to go to find information.
Oh, yeah.
And I wasn't quick enough to write those down, so. And
Okay.
plus, I'm here on behalf of one of my colleagues. He wanted to come, but he had a previous engagement. It's Councilman Stephen Chisholm from the city of Inkster. And
Oh,
yes, and he's also running for the newly 26th district in the state rep house.
we're not doing any.
Oh, I wasn't trying to do, I was just letting, oh, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. No, he is, this voter information because, as you know, Inkster has a problem with getting the message across to people. And I think it comes a lot from just not knowing how the process works. So I'm saying this information is good, excellent for me to take back to them. So
Well,
that's why I was asking for the additional information you had put in the chat boxes.
I think there's a way to print out everything. Jen, do you know? Or
Let's see.
Colleen? Mary Jo
Yeah.
knows. There's a way
Well,
of print.
What I was going to suggest is that when we get the video posted on our YouTube, I can also update the article describing the meeting. And then if somebody, copies the chat and gets me a copy of it, then I could insert those pieces of information in that article on our website. I mean, that's one practical way to do it.
Right. Colleen, are you there?
Yeah.
Because do you know if
Yeah,
we
I'm here.
can we print out the chat?
Anybody
I'm
can.
not sure
Yeah.
when we did a transcription, when we pulled the recording down. I've never done that before, but I thought it normally was possible.
Yeah, so there should
You go down to the bottom to where you type in your message. There's on the right-hand side, there's like a little piece of paper and an emoji, and then there's the 3 dots.
Yeah,
Click on the 3 dots to say more. It says save chat.
right.
And if you click on save chat, it says the chat saved, and then it says show in folder. I'm doing this as we speak. So then that is downloaded onto your computer then. The meeting save chat goes right into your document. Hope that helps.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
if that was, excuse me, if that was for me, I have
No.
to admit, techie is not my thing. So seriously, in fact, the young man I mentioned, I call him my Steven, because whenever I need anything, I go to him for that type of thing. So if it's something I can do myself, I'd be more than happy to try to do it. But
Your man Steve, he's in the Who's Who, the League of Women Voters Who's Who, and I can send it to him because I have it has his email in the Who's Who, so I can send him the downloaded. I just downloaded it. I'll send him the downloaded.
okay. All right. Thank you very much. And once again, very informative. I'm looking forward to
Thank
going
you.
back through it.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. Anyone else?
Plug for the Who's Who. Was that a shameless plug for the Who's Who?
That's a good one.
Good.
Okay.
Good information, Betsy. I want to
Thank-
say. Yeah.
Thank you. I never know what people know and don't know. Yeah.
Thank you, and have a happy St. Patrick's Day or Purim.
I have a
Thank
question. Is there a way to download and print all the PowerPoints?
That's what we were talking about.
Oh,
And
okay.
I see I see in the 3 dots.
It says save chat, but
The transcript, what I did, the thing you downloaded was just the chat,
yeah,
but the PowerPoint is showing if you watch the video. And you can stop the video at any time, and the video is available, right? It's going to be, you're going to somehow post how to,
Yes.
Yeah.
so then you can see the PowerPoint.
and then you can print it if you want. Okay.
Oh, well, now that, I don't know. I said, you can take a screenshot.
Oh, yeah.
I know how to do that from my phone, but not my laptop.
Okay. It's a matter of it's seeing it and digesting it and then never seeing it again. So,
Right.
Okay.
okay.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to close the meeting. I think Jen she has had to leave. So
No,
I will
I'm
close. Oh, you're there.
I'm still here, but you go ahead. You're doing a fine job. No, it's fine.
So Geraldine, thanks for this helpful presentation. I'm glad it was helpful.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
I am saying goodbye. I wish that I could figure out how to do
I'm going to stop the recording now.
thank you.